of programming people's lives. These sociopathic quotes and more can be found in the 2009 documentary We Live in Public by director Andy Timoner.
It's a strange name.
I'm Greg Phipps, and today I'm joined by...
Jordan Randall. I'm here, always. Staple of the show.
Not always, though, because, so we didn't do an episode in April because we were waiting for confirmation and schedules to line up with Zoe and Dave for the interview. And so we just kind of put it off, and we were like, well, we already skipped February, so maybe now we're a bi-monthly podcast, bi-weekly, bi-monthly.
We keep it loose, we do these shows when we want to, we're not on anyone's schedule here. We do it when we feel like we want to do it and when we have a reason to do it.
If we had a sponsor, we'd be assholes.
Yeah, if we were sponsored and we were making money off of this show, it'd be a different story. You'd be hearing from us probably every week.
Right,
but,
and until we get Tokyo Smoke on board to be the sponsor, it's just going to be a loosey-goosey operation. Honestly, I haven't told Jordan about that plan, by the way, but
I'm all for it, because then we could shift the dynamic so that we're always stoned, right? And we would call it a potcast.
Oh,
right?
Interesting. No one's ever made a podcast where the main thing is they get high and talk about pop culture.
Nobody's ever done that before. Never. Not
even a stand-up comedian who made a whole documentary about it too.
Yeah, or no famous boxers either. It's never happened.
It's Mike Tyson. Are you talking about Mike Tyson?
I've never heard that name before.
Sorry, I meant the old man who's gonna beat Jake Paul's ass in July.
Wouldn't it be so sad if Jake Paul beats him up?
It's probably gonna be a thing where they play it up and then they're gonna have it like so. Tyson makes X millions of dollars if Jake wins the fight, and then Jake continues his streak, and then Mike Tyson can be like, man, respect to the young blood for the new generation, or some bullshit.
That's sickening.
Yeah. It's also sickening that he went to prison for getting convicted of rape, but I guess people forgot about that.
We've all moved past that. It's one of those things. It's just like,
Speaking of
He's
moving
Mike Tyson,
past dark events in your life,
yeah,
We Live in Public is a movie about a man named Josh Harris, who is a very strange individual indeed.
Yeah, well, you know what? He's multi-dimensional, multifaceted. This guy has, I think, for those that have seen the film that we watched that we're going to discuss, you see many sides of this man, some that are intriguing and kind of like, admirable. But then you see other sides where you're like, I kind of hate this guy.
Yeah, that's a good way of summating it, I think.
Yeah, I think. All right, let's jump right into it. Right, so like you recommended this film this month.
I did,
Greg. So why would you make me watch this?
Well, first let me just give the rundown of the log line of the movie.
Okay.
So Josh Harris is this internet pioneer entrepreneur in like the mid 90s who founded this company called Pseudo. Actually, no, wasn't it? He was doing something like he was selling like internet futures, essentially.
Yeah, there was something before that.
He was like generating this weird algorithm that could determine like, it was basically he was making up like, if you invest in this company, it'll go like, you'll make so much money in so little time. He was bullshitting, but then it ended up coming true. Right. And then he started a company called Pseudo that used the same sort of methods that these companies used, even though he was making it up. And it went public, and he made $80 million alone just by himself in net worth. So he was a millionaire internet guy, and he was like, I'm a weird, crazy artist guy living in New York. What can I do with all this wealth instead of just sit on it like some kind of asshole? So Pseudo was like this, it was like Twitch. It was the original Twitch. But like, because it was such early internet, like dial-up internet, it was like 1 frame a second video. So it was very primitive in terms of the technology. But Josh essentially used the like exciting nature of the internet and this like emerging culture of, the virtual world and the World Wide Web to like get people's attention and essentially like pioneer the act of live streaming online. And it escalated to the point where he started this social experiment of sorts, slash art piece, slash, I don't really know what you want, a cult, I guess, like Stanford prison experiment. It's like many things in one, but it was called Quiet, We Live in Public. I don't really know. I think it's Quiet colon. I feel like they never really mention the word quiet. They're always saying we live in public, but that also applies to what happened after the New York part. So they spent a month in this underground bunker, and it's like you signed away basically your rights to your privacy, and like you couldn't leave, which I forgot about before I rewatched this. I think this is like the fourth time I've seen this. You couldn't leave until it was over, and there were basically like cameras everywhere. Every single bunk had a camera, and there were like constantly people walking around with like handheld cameras, and everything was tied to this like CCTV monitoring getup, and it was just like this weird experiment to show like how people, you know, they want to be famous at the cost, no matter the cost. And it was like he was trying to illustrate that, but at the same time, it also like this whole thing is like a huge foreshadowing for what internet culture has turned into in like 2024. It's insane. Like the things you're hearing him say, you're like, holy shit, this guy was like, he was like a prophet almost. Like he could tell how things could spiral out of control just based on the human condition. And he was 100% right. Like in to the point where like by the time the experiment ends and he moves in with his girlfriend and they keep live streaming their lives from their apartment, it gets to the point where the internet commenters start turning on him. And I'm like, this guy is literally just a lol cow. He was the internet's first lol cow. Like, he even invented that somehow.
It's kind of true, yeah.
It's insane. So I don't remember what we were trying to transition into.
I think you hit on a lot of things there, Greg. I think that we'll start at the beginning here because like the way the documentary unfolds, the premise, I guess, is about this kind of social experiment, weird, sex-driven, like voyeuristic thing that he put together. Art piece,
it was basically like an underground hippie commune.
Yeah, pretty much. But like. That's kind of like the meat and the potatoes of the documentary, but the documentary starts off. We don't really get into that bunker shit until like pretty far down the line. Like I think it's like at least
like a
30
solid
minutes
half
into
hour in, yeah.
Yeah, and before that, it's just kind of like building up that sort of like more like prophetic like aspect to Josh Harris. He's kind of the Nostradamus of like computer nerds, I guess. He like
there's also a bit of Citizen Kane in there too.
Totally, yeah, and just it starts off with a very interesting scene because it is a video recording of this guy. He's sending a video of himself to his mother who's on her deathbed. She's got cancer of some sort,
and she's in the hospital, and the family's like, hospital. They want him to come visit her during her last days, and all they get is a tape.
Yeah, he sends this tape, and I think his brother even mentions that it's pretty cold. You can see like the kind of emotional magnitude is lacking in his response. His mother's gonna die. He's just like, well, bye. I guess I'll see you on the other side. What does he say? He says like, say hi to all
That's basically it. Yeah,
my friends and family that are up there.
He's like, and I'll see you when I pass through or something like that. But then it's also like, they do explain why he is that way at that moment later, like towards the end of the documentary. They recontextualize that, but without context, the way it starts, you're like, who the fuck is this guy? Why is he being such a dick to his mom?
Why is he being such a dick?
How did he get to this point? And I guess that's.
But then it is a very well sequenced documentary, for sure, because like it gives you tidbits of information to make you think a certain way about this character. And I think it's like that first thing, you're like, oh wow, this guy's a dick. But then you kind of get a little bit of his like background, and then you start to like formulate this opinion that he's like basically a robot, like the way that he's interacting with technology, the way he's viewing the
he was
internet,
the original Mr. Beast.
Yeah, I mean, hey, no.
No, really. He was using his millions to entertain people in dumb, larger-than-life, like, internet stunts.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, he comes across more as, like, like one of those, like an alien or like a robot or something where it's just like he's like, he's got very little social grace, and he is just like, about the zeros and ones, like he like sees the world like fucking like how Neo does the end
Yeah.
of the Matrix, like
But there is also
binary.
like the ego part of it where he spends a lot of his time pontificating, and like any time a thought comes to his head, he has to verbalize it. And a lot of the stuff he says is true, and maybe at the time it seemed like out of the box.
Well, it's funny because like he's going around with like CBS or something, like some news station is walking around with him, and he's like, "This shit's gonna take your jobs." Like he's just like fucking like a dick about everything.
Oh yeah,
you
he's
know?
like, we've already got more channels than your company does, and we're gonna eventually replace you. Like he's seeing that like to like Dan Rather or something.
Yeah, he's like completely spot on with that prediction, and like he knows
yeah.
it. And it's just it's so interesting because it's like, okay, well, how do you as a viewer, how do you perceive this character from the standpoint of 2024? Like you look back and you're like, well, this guy's kind of a dick, like, but he's totally right. But at the time, you wouldn't know that. You'd just be like, this guy's crazy. Like, what are you talking about? It's not going to replace news.
Do you know that? Do you know that Onion article where it's like heartbreaking? The worst guy you know just made an excellent point.
I don't know that, but that's definitely what this is.
I wouldn't
That's
say
definitely...
Josh is the worst guy though.
No, he's not the worst guy, but he's like kind of an ass. Like he is an asshole. As the film goes on, like it reveals more and more of his like darker side, and ultimately, I mean, with all due respect, he's a bit of a nerd that got too much power, and he let that power like put him in directions that are fucking sinister. Like we'll get into it, but
Well, it's also worth pointing out, you were talking about his backstory as the movie starts, and I feel like this is the point where I should bring up that he had like a number of like childhood it's like he had like a few incidents as a kid where his arms got pulled out of his sockets, and then he had like other bedridden illnesses, and so his mother was basically a hypochondriac when it came to him and was like overprotective and sheltered him, and so he spent most of his time just watching TV, especially Gilligan's Island.
Right,
Is how he
that's
like
right.
identified and learned about the world was through the television. And so it makes sense that like as he grew up, he wanted to shape the world to fit the way he had been raised to think that the world was supposed to be, which is that everyone is supposed to appear on that tube and everyone is going to want to share themselves the way that, actors in Hollywood do at little bits, except for, I mean, again, totally 100% right, but at the time it's like, this guy's fucking nuts. Like, who would want to be on TV all day long? And there's a quote, I wrote it down, where he says, people used to only want 15 minutes of fame. Now they want 15 minutes of fame every day. And you're like, I mean, what is that other than like going viral for a tweet? It's essentially
Sure.
the exact same thing that he's talking about. Like,
I mean, it's so real these days. I mean, like you just look at like TikTok or any of these videos that are on any social media platform. It's insane how fabricated they are and how bullshit they are. But anyone will do anything, They'll dress up a guy like a homeless guy and pretend to give him some money so you can get a bunch of likes. So people go, "Oh man, you're a really good person. Deep down you didn't do fucking shit, but you're still carrying that with you." Fooling yourself to think that you're, worthy of the world giving you this acknowledgement and appreciation. And that's the thing. Like Harris was, watching Gilligan's Island, and it's scripted, man. It's scripted, And it's like he took what was something that was very well. I mean, Gilligan's Gilligan's Island, but methodically kind of like crafted to relay a certain feeling for the audience watching. He kind of like did that, but then forgot that like that stuff's scripted. So he made like the unscripted version where anything can happen.
it's like
And
Synecdoche, New York.
yeah,
Right?
it is.
Where Philip Seymour Hoffman's character is essentially trying to recreate his own life in a play form, but then it just becomes too meta where he starts casting the real people as themselves, and then some roles get recast with other actors that feel that they understand the characters more than the real people. And so it's like, yeah, Josh is kind of doing that where he's sort of like socially engineering people to try and be his puppets, essentially.
Yeah, but he's not scripting it, so he's got a massive wild card sitting in front of him. Gilligan's Island works because it all makes sense because it's like, well, that person does this, and then that person would do that. But the fact that he's not scripting it, which you'll see with the bunker, which you'll see with his relationship with his girlfriend, that's where he can't figure it out, because it's like he didn't write a script, and people are unpredictable. They're all going to do their own. It's fucking chaos. The bunker was chaos. It became chaos, and his relationship and his life became chaos because he didn't script it. He just filmed it.
Yeah, which is where the filmmaker Undie Timoner comes into it.
Which sounds like a Star Wars name, by the way.
Yes, but it's a real person. She was like, I think she had already made like a handful of documentary features out of like college and stuff. She was like very politically driven growing up. And I think she came into this whole thing when Josh just hired her as like a camera person for hire to film one of his like, you know, New York exclusive sex parties, essentially. It's like everyone does sex and drugs and parties in the
Wasn't
club.
she hired to film part of the pseudo like TV network or something like that?
No, I think it started with the parties. And
Oh,
then
okay,
it
and then it went
evolved
to the-
into he calls her and says, "Hey, I'm doing this bunker thing. Like I'm going to make
Right,
history
right.
essentially." Which in a way he was right, but maybe not in such a notable way that like people on the street know who he is.
Yeah, those parties though, I think we should talk about that, like, because that's something I wasn't aware of. You know, I remember the '90s. I was a child. I didn't go to these crazy parties because I was, you know, I was way too young for that.
You weren't the 11-year-old kid that had his own pod in the bunker?
No,
They
no,
sped past that shit. Like, that could be its own documentary.
Honestly,
The
I
fuck
mean,
was that?
they did. I kind of forgot about that.
There's so many things you forget about in this movie because
That kid was like privy to all the things that were happening in that bunker, like,
especially the
where-
guns, which we haven't
What's his
even gotten into yet, but we will.
Were his parents in the bunker too, or he just came there alone? We don't know. How did he get in?
The editing in this movie is so like fast-paced and chaotic that it conveys sort of like the constant whiplash you go through in that chaotic bunker.
That's crazy. Yeah. But anyway, those parties like that. Yeah, they talked about his parties. His like, it's like, you know, a nerd's dream come true. Like there's computer guys. You know, they look like computer guys from the '90s, and they're surrounded by like babes that are like naked and like wearing like outfits from like the fucking Fifth Element, and it's insane. I'm like, what
That's actually,
is happening?
maybe
here?
they were directly trying to do a Fifth Element thing. Like because they're nerds, they saw that movie and they're like, "This looks awesome. We have money. We could do that.
Honestly,
We can get a singing blue lady."
yeah, that's probably what happened. It's crazy. Yeah, so that was like the first thing where I was like, whoa. I didn't think this documentary was gonna, because I don't think they show anything explicit, but you can tell like,
There's
these
a
parties
few
are like off,
nude
off
bodies,
the
but
chain.
I think like maybe it's just like a topless dancer or two. But that's
Yeah,
really
I don't think that there was any explicit nudity in that part, because I
No,
was kind of
if
wondering.
anything, the
'cause I was
grossest
like,
part of it is when he goes, "I've got the Viagra," and he's holding up a pill bottle, and you're just like, "Ew."
yeah. Now the grossest part is when that guy almost rapes a woman in the like the sphere shower.
Okay, the geodesic shower. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we're gonna have to address this eventually, and we'll probably forget about it later. So let's towards the end of the bunker sequence. I think it's even like New Year's Eve, like 1999. So
Yeah, it's,
Y2K
like,
was
right
about to happen.
approaching the Y2K thing. Yeah.
And I think so. If you watch that scene without any context, which I did, first of all, I saw this movie for the first time. I was 16 years old. My friend David was like, "Hey, you should check out this documentary," and I was like, "That sounds cool. I'll check it out." As I was like, that was the year that I was like watching a shitload of movies.
Okay, where did you watch
And I think
it?
I rented it off Netflix like as a
Oh, you
DVD,
okay. Wow.
or maybe it might have even been streaming on there. It was like right when the streaming thing was like starting. It was before House of Cards, but they were still like getting a bunch of titles, and so I watched it.
Okay.
And that scene comes up, and you're just like, I can't believe they showed that in a movie. If that's like, and if you assume that because you're watching a documentary, what's happening is 100% real and earnest. I'm not saying that the filmmakers manipulated what's happening to convey a different context. I think that it's actually the opposite, because I got the DVD like within the last few months because I went on a fervor of buying a bunch of physical copies of documentaries. And there happens to be, first of all, Josh has a commentary on the DVD, which I haven't heard all of yet. I don't know if I'd be able to sit through that without a couple drinks, but
Well, I would love to hear what he says during that scene.
yeah, because he's just sitting there watching it, isn't he? He's like,
think
I'm
he's
sitting here
somewhere in
at
the
6
yeah.
a.m. I'm watching this happen, and I don't really give a shit. It's like he's so
something
numb
along
to
those
all
lines.
of it by that point. Okay, so yeah, they're in the shower. There's like this guy in there, and he's like doing this crazy act where he's like, "Esmeralda, come to me," and then they pan over, and there's this like woman who's basically only wearing a dress, like there's no anything else, like a loose sort of fabric-y curtain dress, and she's like hanging from the rafters in the basement, and like not by a noose, just by her arms. She's like
that'd be a whole different.
she's like a
story.
contortionist dancer, and
Yeah.
then he just like grabs her, and it's like they're weird. I think it's performance art. I say that because I listened to the director's commentary, and she's like, so this is I think what a lot of people misconstrued as an actual sexual assault, but in fact was a bizarre abstract piece of performance art.
And then this happened later that night. A lot of people wonder if this scene is some sort of rape. I don't think that it was. At least, it wasn't intended to be.
Squeezing her ass and he's throwing her all around.
But it was definitely questionable. And once again, it goes back to what Leo said, because of the camera and eyes being on it, I think that she felt like she should go further than she would have otherwise, with the pressure of the performance and all the attention she finally had. And what Josh is saying there is important. The fact that he sat back and he was kind of like, okay, but that's the future. How blasé and sort of desensitized we'll all be about sex and things like violence. Sex and violence. I think he has a point there.
I'm like, I mean, if that's what you
don't
got to
know.
say to cover your ass legally,
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that's
believe
what
her.
it is.
I
don't.
I don't think she would lie about that personally.
I think she's lying.
But these are also weird, artsy, hippie nerds. Like, would you put it past them to do something as edgy and shocking as that? I mean, this is a bunker where people are getting interrogated like they're in Scientology, and in the next room, they're shooting off like Uzis and like all these shotguns and shit in the gun range.
That woman didn't look like she was in on the performance art. And I think if they are, like given all these Uzis, that's the thing is like, it's
I think
like
that's
the
why
same
it
for
goes on
prisoners.
for so long, though. I think that's why nobody steps in and does anything. And I'm not saying that that's like always the case when it's sexual. I mean, that's like, there are movies like Promising Young Woman that explore scenarios like that. I think the whole point of this movie is that life is a performance. And so they were essentially playing it up because they had like 16 cameras pointed at them, and these are weird. I'm not trying. If it really did happen, that's fucked up, and I'm not trying to justify it. However, this is a very specific instance where,
Having said that,
I had the question, and the director went, "Actually, it's not what you think." However, that does not mean that there is not a legitimate attempted sexual assault in this movie.
I think we need to hear from the couple. I think we need to hear from Esmeralda.
That might not have even been her name. That's just.
It sounds right though.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there was enough legitimate like drama and hurt feelings. There's so much happening in this documentary.
Yeah, I think we gotta reverse a little
Okay.
bit. Our listeners are gonna be like, whoa, this.
Hey,
this
we're
is
replicating the
jump-
experience of watching the movie because they're just constantly hitting you with stuff.
It's just fucking crazy, honestly. So he does the pseudo thing, right? And then that's pretty popular and stuff. And then he's getting this fucking insatiable hunger for upping the ante, I guess. And then he builds this thing. It's not. Is it underground? I think
It's
it's
an
like in a warehouse,
underground.
right?
It's like a 6th floor down basement in like
Right.
Manhattan. It's like across the street from the courthouse. And they said it was like a 2-block walk from the World Trade Center, which was still a thing at that point.
It was still standing.
This was like December. It was like it started like December 10th, 1999 or something like that. The actual
Right.
experiment, but they were constructing it for like a couple months before that.
And like, so they had access to like all these like kind of regular things outside of the bunker itself and being in their, quote unquote pods that are basically just like bunk
Free
beds.
food,
They got free
shelter.
food, free nightclubs. Like it was, basically a pretty sweet deal if it wasn't for the fact that you had to be like filmed constantly in every moment.
And
so like
there's also a detail we forgot, which is that each pod has a little monitor
right,
that's like, bolted to it or what have you. There's like an arm where you can rotated around, and they have basically, you can tune into any camera in the bunker, like any camera at any time. So you can tune into someone else's bunk and watch them fuck someone, or go over and watch someone take a shower, or go over and watch someone sleep, or go over and watch someone get interrogated. Like, I don't know what they were trying to evoke with the interrogation stuff. Like, why were they trying to psychologically break these people with that?
Who was
Like, why
that guy?
add that onto the experiment? It's like too many variables. It's not this guy, I don't think he used the scientific method, Jordan. I really don't think.
I don't think so.
He started with this hypothesis, but he got lost somewhere along.
Who was that guy who was like screaming at people?
I
and
don't
stuff?
even
Was
know.
He, was he qualified?
They
to do any
never
of
set
that? He's
him
just-
up
he's just a
before
friend?
he shows up in those scenes. Like, was he part of Pseudo? Like, you see some of the
Yeah, they don't-
actors or like the hosts from Pseudo are like participants in the
Yeah.
experiment, and then later being interviewed.
Oh my God! Hey, whoa! Wait! We forgot
hit the
about
brakes.
something. We forgot about something.
Okay.
Okay. So before the bunker stuff, fucking Josh Harris reveals himself to be a maniac because he has an alter ego
Lovey.
called Lovey the Clown.
You know, Jordan, the note I wrote when I rewatched the movie was, "Oh God, I always forget about Lovey," and I already forgot about him.
I forgot. My God. Okay, we need to talk about this because
has
that was the first gigantic red flag. Like this is
So he's
a red
getting
flag
these
the sizes
like
of you've never seen.
newspaper and magazine spreads written about him, like America's next cool guy. Like, this guy's on top of it. He's hip.
Yeah.
He's young. He's
got his finger
wild.
on the pulse
Yeah,
of the
he knows
internet.
what the young people want. And then he starts doing them in like really disgusting looking clown makeup, like almost like one of
Yeah.
John Wayne Gacy's drawings come to life.
Yeah. It's like sleazy clown makeup.
He's wearing white and like yellow and red, but it's all like splotchy, and he's like he's got like spittle coming out. That's like the paint is just like leaking on it. He's just a disgusting. And
It's
he like spikes
disgusting.
up his hair,
Yeah.
and he's got like thin rimmed glasses on, so he just looks as like creepy as possible. And then he starts doing these like magazine shoots as that character, and the investors are like, okay, I don't know what the fuck is going on. We're going to
Yeah,
distance
they're like, "Could you
ourselves from
not?"
this guy. And then pulling back from that is essentially what led to the bunker experiment, is that he just needed another thing to spearhead, essentially.
There was still like, because he was still like kind of, well, obviously like a socially awkward kind of guy. But I feel like I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've seen this movie 5 times. I feel like there was a scene that was saying that like he was starting to get like, interest in like female interest in him, even with the Lovey thing going on. Like, oh, he's fucking crazy, eccentric, billionaire, genius guy who's
Jordan,
gonna,
Robert Durst was
he-
married twice. Okay? That's all I got to say about that.
I see your point.
As long as you're charming and you have a lot of money.
It's the second part, Greg. It's the second part. I don't think that Lovey the Clown has any degree of charm to him.
No, but and I'm not trying to be a misogynist or anything, but I think it's not unreasonable to say that if you're a young woman living in New York and a rich man shows interest in you, there's more pros than cons at the start.
There is a fairly large community known as the Juggalos, and they're just doing
So
that shit,
was
like,
something I
willingly,
noted
so.
when Pseudo was distancing themselves from Lovey. I was like, clown makeup in 1999. I can't imagine why they wouldn't be excited about that. And, Woodstock 99 had just happened, and the fires, and like, I don't necessarily think ICP was like, I think like more like Limp Bizkit and other bands like that were probably had fingers pointed at him because of all that. But I think it all was sort of part of the same subculture.
Sure, yeah, it definitely
So
was.
I think it was just more like, oh God.
No, I just wanted to rewind and touch on Lovey the Clown a little bit because that was the first indication that's like, okay, well, we knew that he was kind of robotic and maybe like devoid of human emotion, but seeing the clown and then other people, like not just the investors, like there was like close, like his family and friends, right? Like his brothers were being like, yeah, we kind of like all told him, like, could you drop the Lovey the Clown thing? Like, You know, I get that you think it's funny, but really it's just making everybody feel like kind of nauseous. And he was just like, nope, this is who I am. Was that modeled after something, or it was like modeled after a Gilligan character too, right? Like a old lady or something.
Hey, you're the old one here, so you'd know better than I would. I just assume you've seen everything from the past, even though you're only
I'm not 70 years old, Greg. God damn.
Hey, everyone has
Gilligan's
TV
Island
land, all right?
No, it's in the documentary. It's there. There's a thing. Is it say like the brother says that?
Look, I'm gonna use my excuse. If I don't remember something, it's because this movie is edited so quickly that you ultimately will just end up forgetting a number of things.
I think it's a trauma response. It's so disturbing.
There's so many twists and like avenues that it goes down that you like, Jordan. When I asked your initial reaction, that was like one of the first things you said. You were like, it kept going places I did not expect at all for it to go.
Yeah, that's true. I did say that.
And that's why this movie is so fucking great, because those are the best stories where you're just like, huh? How did we get here from there? Speaking of things you might have forgotten.
Oh, yeah.
The animation. The TV head animation.
Oh, God. The song that they were singing? What was that song?
Yeah. I don't know. I was trying to remember the lyric.
It's something. It was so baffling. And I remember I tried to commit the song to memory because I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah.
But I forgot.
Maybe we'll do a cover for the outro song.
Yeah. I think that was a trauma response on my part. My brain, I was like, I got to remember these lyrics because I'm going to bring this up on the podcast. It's going to be so funny if I sing the song. And then my brain was just like, no, you're not fucking doing that.
It was like it was like a low poly, early like VeggieTales level animation of like these people dancing, and they all had like TV heads, but then their heads are all like their faces take up the entirety of the screen. So it's like George Lopez and Shark Boy and Lava Girl, kind of.
Yeah.
And then they're saying some lyric over and over again, and I'm just gonna cut to the clip right now.
Launder my head, launder my head, launder, 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 launder my head.
Launder, 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 launder my head.
The lyrics came to me, and I spent 2 years turning it into a little piece of animation. The art that I make is explaining to humans what's going to happen next.
So, yeah, and then later he refers to that in several other animated shorts that he made as art. And I think this is the point where we have to bring up a central theme of this movie, which is, what is art, really, at the end of the day? How do you define art? And further, you know, where does the line between art and real life end or begin? You know,
life is art, man. Art is life.
So I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell him that it's not art if he made it with the intent of it being art, because then that would make me a hypocrite. But I'm just saying that's a pretty liberal use of that word. That's all.
I mean, couldn't anything technically be art?
Yeah. I mean, that's the scene from This Is the End, right? Where he's like,
you had
your mom
and dad had sex, and then
your dad's
art.
dick was the paintbrush.
Yeah.
Your mom's pussy was the canvas. That's art.
Yeah, you're the art. Yeah, it's true though. Like, you know, it's hard. I've had these
Josh
discussions.
is art, essentially. So
Josh is art. Is he an artist? Now that's the question. You know,
I think
his life has become an art piece, but is he an artist?
How have we gotten this far without mentioning that everyone kept referring to him as the Warhol of the web?
Oh yeah, that's right.
They did many comparisons to Andy Warhol.
Yeah, and the director of this film shot music videos for the Dandy Warhols.
Yes, that's okay. While we're on the topic, first of all, one of the guys shows up in this movie very briefly when they're like constructing the bunker, and he's just like, I don't know what the fuck's going on here. But you bring up the Dandy Warhols. The previous movie that this director made, Dig, which won like I think the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance when it came out, was a documentary about the like sort of friendly rivalry between the Dandy Warhols and the Brian Jonestown Massacre. Mm-hmm. And so she was filming that, another movie called Join Us, and We Live in Public all at the same time. But, you know, like Dig was finished and came out in 2004. We Live in Public, the story goes from like 90 something, like early mid 90s to like 2008, essentially.
It's basically a decade.
So it was a long ass trek. And that's also what's interesting about this movie is that there's like a whole, I think with documentaries, there's like a dichotomy where there's two stories essentially when you finish a documentary. There's the story that you're telling in the, tangible piece of media. And then there's the story of you making it.
Right.
And more often than not, that part is not ever really shown. It's just experienced by the filmmaker. And so it's interesting that Andi Timoner's life was just so like busy, essentially, like professionally, that she was just like in the like apex of all this culture in New York pre 9/11 that allowed her to sort of like have all these like fingers in all these different pies,
Yeah, for sure.
Which you shouldn't put your finger in a pie. I mean,
no, it's very unhygienic.
Yeah, and cake is better anyway. So.
Yeah. When you're right, you're right.
I'm glad you didn't fight me on the pie hate.
I wouldn't.
I don't like pie. Right. It's just weird.
Yeah.
It's soup essentially. It's preserved soup inside of a crust.
Inside crust. Yeah.
Yeah.
Soup inside of crust. It's true. I'm glad we set the record straight here. Hopefully.
I prefer much more of a sweet and sugary lasagna type dish. So Y2K, there was like a number of doomsday cults that sprouted up around it, right? Like not anything like as substantial as like the Joseph Camp stuff.
Well, it got pretty crazy. People were like stockpiling shit. It was like
the bunker. Is what I'm getting at, Jordan.
Yeah, I remember it. I was like 12 or 13 when that happened. So like I remember like staying awake, till midnight with my mom, and we were like not sure what was gonna happen. When it's so stupid. It's like, I was in Spain, like. Other places in the world had already.
Were people speculating like the planes are going to fall out of the sky and the nuclear warheads are going to launch because the computer malfunctions?
Yeah, everything is set up to that fucking timestamp of going to 11:59 on 1999, and if it goes past that, everything's going to screw up because it's going to think that it started again at year 0 or something, and it's going to launch all these ballistic missiles across the world. And the planes will fall out of the sky, and the banks will just like money's going to be shooting out of the ATMs, and then people are going to start looting them, and the stores, alarm systems are going to fail, and the cash registers. It was this crazy thing, and I remember like, I didn't care too much. My family wasn't really paying too much attention to it, but I do remember like the night of. It was kind of like one of those things where it was like, but what if, like maybe I've been playing this a little too laissez-faire. Maybe everything's going to get hella catastrophic, right when the clock strikes midnight. And sure enough, nothing happened and just went to bed.
That's why I like the Family Guy episode. Like one of like the very first Family Guy episodes where Y2K does happen. And then they just sort of explore like, okay, now what happens? Like what happens to the survivors? And I was like, that's actually kind of like, like weirdly dystopian, and it had like more creepy vibes to it than like pretty much any other Family Guy episode that I've seen.
You could technically, if you wanted to, you could imagine that that's what Civil War, the recent Alex Garland movie's about. Yeah.
Although I think that was more of a drone strike than a.
It's non-specified, so it's open to interpretation.
Anyway,
make of it what you will.
We can tie this all back into the documentary because Y2K rolls around. I think they get through the new year, but then it's like very shortly after that, the cops come in and shut them down. And they specifically say like Giuliani was on their ass, and they were like speculating that they were like some sort of doomsday cult because people are hearing gunshots just out on the street coming from this underground bunker, like right across from the courthouse. They don't know what the fuck's going on. Y2K is coming around. Here's all these crazy hippies. They've got food. They've got shelter. They've got X, Y, and Z to last them.
They have a shooting range.
And all these guns stockpiled in case, I guess, martial law goes into effect.
There's an 11-year-old kid in a bunker with a bunch of sex maniacs and weird artists, society's burden, and they're shooting guns. And they're fucking each other and they're shitting on camera.
This is where the power of the documentary comes into play, because earlier we were talking about whether or not the way the scene is presented was manipulated by the filmmaker to obfuscate the truth. And I think parts of that come through in just as a byproduct of how the raid sequence is edited. They leave out the fact that, like, well, first of all, the only reason they were able to even have guns and get away with that for so long is because they filed a filmmaker's permit with the city of New York. We're making a movie. So, you know, that was how they were able to get around that loophole and just go nuts with their shooting range at all hours of the day. Or I don't know. They didn't really get that specific with it, but
that make it a movie line gets you out of anything. It's like the ultimate trump card. You could be like robbing a bank, and then when like when the cops show up, you
just got to hire people to point cameras at you from
Guys,
far away.
Yeah, exactly. You hire a couple of the other like bank robbers to hold cameras.
That's what Al Pacino should have done in Dog Day Afternoon.
Guys, we're making a movie.
He would have gotten away with it.
He should have done. He would have been.
He would have gotten the money
scot-free.
for his boyfriend's surgery.
Yeah, everyone would have just been like, "Oh, cool, as you were," and then they just leave.
And then there's another part of it where I can't remember which. I was watching through the bonus features on the DVD. I think it might just be there was like a couple of deleted scenes, and there was like an extended sequence of talking about the gun range, and Josh in his so much basically says like he essentially set them up to be raided by the cops because he knew it would make for an entertaining end to the experiment. I don't think the movie gets into that, but
so it was kind of scripted.
I think it does kind of take away, like if you knew that it was that was part of Josh's plan, it wouldn't have hit as hard, I don't think, to be like, oh, it's over, but also like that sigh of relief, like, oh, thank fuck it's over and no one got killed or hurt.
Mm-hmm. Probably would have gone there.
Well, yeah, they were talking about how like you could see it as the footage goes on that like towards the end, people were just becoming like animals, like infantile animals, essentially. Like when everything is free, you just like, what's the word? Recede into that like childhood mindset. And I think that's maybe part of what Josh was intending. Like he wanted to have people like that. Like he felt like his childhood was robbed, so this was sort of him like as an adult, like it maybe in a less weird way, like the Michael Jackson Neverland Ranch with all the amusement park rides and stuff. Like this is his version of Neverland with less sexual assault, allegedly.
Well, you know what it is. I mean, they both.
We don't need to get into that. We got more of that coming up.
I think you're right. I think you're right though, Greg, because I think what you could look at is Michael Jackson's scenario was like him trying to reclaim his like infantile youth, whereas like Josh Harris is trying to reclaim like almost like a teenage era.
This
youth,
is what the teenage guys, guns, sex, booze, free living, anarchy,
the internet.
So it's a good movie.
Twisted.
I'll give it that. There's a lot
of
different dimensions to it.
So okay, so the bunker is like where the movie, the documentary gets its namesake from, but that's kind of like the centerpiece. And then outside of the bunker being shut down, then we kind of like follow the aftermath, which kind of echoes the bunker, but just sees Josh, and shockingly he gets a girlfriend, and they are just in their own private 24/7 filmed
Tanya
bubble of their apartment.
She was it should be pointed out, she was one of the hosts on one of the shows on Pseudo. That was how
right yeah. So they did know each other before a bit, I guess.
And I'm not sure if she was one of the like staff members of the bunker or one of the participants, but I don't really think you see a lot of her until they go on this boat trip after the bunker gets raided, and like his family comes along, and they all talk about how it was like sort of a nice reset, and Josh seemed a lot more at ease and less stressed out, and then he got really close to Tanya, and then he goes, hey, let's move in together, and we'll broadcast our lives to the world and keep it going. And I think he was just like obsessed with this idea of like voyeurism, like the Big Brother 1984 kind of, not like thought police stuff so much, but it just more like the constant surveillance. And like he even foreshadowed like the Patriot Act and like the NSA and stuff, like how you don't have a choice, like nowhere in this documentary does anyone ever put tape over a camera lens, and maybe they should have at certain points, but yeah. So they move in together, and things are going great at first. They're really enjoying the concept, and I would say it gets like maybe 4 or 5 months in. And at first they were doing anything on camera, like shitting, having sex, arguing. I mean, not so much arguing, but like, just whatever. Literally their entire lives. Nothing was hidden.
Yeah. Day to day.
I think they even had a camera
Regular
inside
shit.
the toilet that looked up at your asshole as the shit and piss were coming out of your.
Yeah, there was
Yeah.
like a butthole cam. Yeah. It's insane.
Which I think the Whitest Kids You Know made a sketch out of.
Oh, really?
Where they're at a party. and
R.I.P.
then-
Trevor Moore.
Yes.
Is his name Trevor Moore?
R.I.P. Trevor Moore. Which, non sequitur, since we brought up the Whitest Kids You Know, for those of you that are like, I want to watch HD versions of the show without having to steal it, go on shout.tv, I think. It's like Shout is the company. They just put it up like 2 weeks ago. All 5 seasons and the Civil War on Drugs, all in HD. And they're putting out a box set later this year. And it's like the first time that seasons 4 and 5 have been available on disc. So
Is that the same as Shout Factory?
I think so.
Nice. That's good. It's good company. They do a lot of good restoration.
If you liked the Whitest Kids You Know as a youngin',
Shout out to Shout.
yes. I mean, it comes with ads, but I mean, so does everything nowadays. I'm surprised that actually isn't, speaking of which, a heavier theme in this movie, is that like it seems like he was afraid of the corporate sellout side of it. Where it's not like, We Live in Public sponsored by Coca-Cola. Because it probably, for a very good reason, you can't pitch this concept to a corporation and expect them to be like, yeah, what could go wrong, Like, not everyone is as naive and let's do it anyway minded as, like, the Fire Festival guys,
Right. But I think also, like, he wanted it to be his own thing. So I don't think there was room for, like, advertisement, because he's just pumping his own money. He had really
That's
no
the
concern.
thing, is it's like if he wanted to never go broke and actually keep this thing going, he would have been more forward thinking in regards to that. But I think he might have just thought $80 million, it's 1999. This will last me a lifetime, which it probably could have if he didn't spend it, almost all of it on dumb shit.
100%. It's insane. The waste of money.
Going back to the apartment, they're like, yeah, and we were just living. I'm like, okay, cool. What did you do all day long? Like, did you have a job, or were you just sitting around the apartment were you watching TV? Like,
He's
what
like
do you
scrolling
do to
through
fill
the
your
internet.
time? I guess they were responding to the chatters and like getting to know their audience.
Yeah. He's just responding.
It's like you can't do that all day long.
I think he was, because that's what fueled him, right? It's like
It goes back to what you were talking about. He's like a robot, and that hyperfixation, you can't deviate from it.
like she was getting pissed off about that. Which I guess is a good segue into,
the thing we keep putting off,
which is that Josh is a little bit of a rapey guy himself.
Little bit.
His
So it gets to the point where they're starting to argue on camera, and things are getting a little darker in their relationship, and then they stop having sex essentially because she knows that she's being filmed, and she's suddenly becoming like self-conscious about it, and ultimately understandably doesn't want thousands of strangers to watch her and her partner have sex every single time. And so they're having this sort of half discussion, half argument about it, and then she sort of like straddles him and gives him a kiss on the cheek to like try and cheer him up and make him feel better. And then he just like sort of aggressively like grabs her and like is trying to sort of initiate sex, but she's clearly like not wanting it at all for the very same reason we just brought up. And so and within like the span of, I think, about 45 seconds, it goes from like silence to like her screaming and throwing stuff at him to get him to stop. And then it just turns in, I think they almost break up in that moment. The way it's edited, it's kind of hard to tell if it's the same day or like a week later or something like that. But the relationship does not last very long after that. And I'm not going to say this one's performance art. Maybe Josh would, because he has a weird definition of what art is.
Yeah, this is just a guy being.
I think he should be lucky that she stopped things when she did.
Yeah,
because it probably could have landed him in. I mean, thousands of people are watching you. If it actually did escalate to the point where, he's committing a felony against her.
Yeah.
Cops, they know where he lives. They're just going to show up immediately and haul him off in the paddy wagon. So
it was definitely the scene where
he became real Icarus.
Yes, he flew.
This movie should have been called
Icarus,
not that other piece of shit.
Icarus in public.
He flew too close to the sun, which I guess is a common theme in documentaries. That's like the common arc is big rise and then big fall, and then maybe some emotional redemption.
He was like Icarus in that he flew too close to the sun, but he took it a step further because he almost tried to rape the sun. And that is the moment in the movie.
You can't do that.
Where I was like...
Your dick will melt off if you try to rape the sun.
That's true, but he still tried. And
I mean, everything will melt off if you can even get that close.
But first would be your dick because it protrudes out a little bit further. By a
maybe.
millisecond or
like,
something.
If I was floating through space, I'd want to be head first,
I guess.
But
dick first, man.
Josh Harris is a different kind of guy.
Josh Harris is going dick first through outer space.
You know how long it takes to fly to the sun? You're really going to stay hard that long, Jordan?
Well, it depends on how fast you're propelled. Because in space, there's...
Or it depends if you use Blue Chew, our sponsor for this episode.
If you have Blue Chew when you're being jettisoned through outer space towards the sun, you will stay hard long enough for you to get just the tip in before you are scorched to a, I don't know, just a bunch of ashes floating, just a bloody, cosmic dust.
You just get, it's like the Nazi at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, except a lot faster and probably... I don't know, less cinematic.
Less cinematic, for sure. Anywho, that bit was in the movie was like definitely that like nail, like in the coffin lid for me for Josh, where I was like, okay, like the guy's a bit of a cold robotic weirdo, and it was like, okay, like he's got some forward thinking ideas that are coming from his like his weird attachment to computers and his obsession with, I guess, his like narcissistic personality. And then it's like, okay, Lovey the clown, this is getting pretty kind of fucking psychotic. And then it's like, okay, and the bunker is like weird and things that are happening aren't being stopped, and he's allowing, okay, this guy's got no moral compass. And then it's like, that was the moment where it's like, oh, he's just like a sad guy, like a pathetic guy trapped in the body of a guy who just happened to become super wealthy, and with the wealth, as you said, comes power, and he found himself in a situation. And it's not hard to imagine, some 15-year-old like kid that may be considered a nerd that like feels inadequate and like, somehow landed the big fish and is like, I'm the fucking guy now, I could do whatever I want. And it's like, no, you're not. You're still the piece of shit you were before the money, and now you're impacting other people's lives, and fuck you, basically. And that was the moment.
Let me ask you something, Jordan. What made you feel more uncomfortable, watching that scene or watching the entirety of Sperm World?
Oof. that's actually a pretty tricky question.
For some context, for those of us that aren't us.
Yeah.
I had seen this movie Sperm World that had come out on Hulu, and in Canada and elsewhere in the world, it's on Disney Plus.
Shockingly,
I thought it was really good, but like We Live in Public, I have that sort of disconnect between like my personal feelings towards the subjects involved and then my critical analysis of the filmmaking and the presentation and all that. So I gave it an 8 out of 10 because I was like, this is a really well-made film. I might have even given it a 9 because I was just like, I think this is one of the best documentaries of the year. Jordan, you should check it out. And he goes, yeah, I'll check it out. And the next day he posted a review and he goes, this is the most disgusting movie I've ever seen in my life. 1 out of 10. And I was like, shit.
Yeah, I gave it a 1 out of 10.
I actually felt kind of offended. I was like, oh man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ruin your day with this recommendation.
I think I put in the review that it was more uncomfortable than watching porn with your parents.
Yeah.
And honestly, I had that thought when I was going through it. I was like, honestly, I think I'd rather be in that scenario because I don't know, it was just so icky. I do get what you're saying because it is an interesting way of shooting a documentary because it's shot like a Harmony Korine film, but it's
is it Korine?
I don't know.
Harmony Korine, I think, is...
Korine?
I'm sorry to actually you, but... you're the one that's seen his movies, so I figure you should know.
I've never heard him say his name, though.
It's Scorsese, Jordan, not Scorsese. It's Scorsese.
Well, neither of these guys say their names in their movies, so how am I supposed to know?
Well, neither does Tommy Wiseau. It's not like he comes on screen. Hello, I am Tommy Wiseau.
But based on the way he talks, that it's Wiseau.
I guess.
It's got to be,
We've majorly deviated from
We've deviated, but while we're deviating, I just want to say that, like, yes, Sperm World is only grotesque to me because of the people that are in it. I think, like, if it was other people and it was shot the same way, I think I may have had a better response to it. But because I found the people so just absolutely appalling in the movie, I found the cinematography and stuff to just kind of like push it. Because it's like in really fucking digressing here, but the dude, the old guy who's like impregnating the younger woman who's like a quarter of his age.
Like cystic fibrosis.
Yeah, and like he's like I just want to let you know there's no strings attached. I'm just gonna donate the sperm and like that's it. I won't be creepy or anything about that. But at the same time, like, do you want to come over and watch a movie? And then like she comes over, and then the movie that they pick is Mulholland Drive, like David Lynch's Mulholland Drive. I was like, oh my god! I was like, this.
And don't they literally? Speaking of watching porn with your parents, it's like a 25-year-old girl watching a lesbian softcore sex scene with a 62-year-old man.
Very sexually charged film. Very weird movie. Sitting there with this.
David Lynch makes movies that are sexually charged. Well, now this is news to me.
They are. He's a sex fiend. That old man, David Lynch.
It's fine.
It's fine unless you're a 62-year-old guy who's just...
Anyway.
Okay, all right.
We can tie all of this back into We Live in Public because I think ultimately Josh was proven right because of the fact that, like, he essentially... Someone says in the movie that he crawled into the TV, but he didn't he was finally inside the TV without a remote in his hand to change when something happened that he didn't want to see or experience.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, he essentially experienced the arc that most, like, internet personalities go through, where they build up this rapport, everyone loves them, and then when things start going the way they don't like, everyone turns on them, which is shown in the movie when Tanya leaves and it's just Josh on camera all day long, and the people in the chat rooms, the few of them that are still left, the stragglers, are just like antagonizing him and making fun of him. That's why I said he was the first lol cow, because that's essentially what he turned into. And it just got to the point where I think he was like American Express. Maybe that was later. And there was just a number of things where he felt like too much was out of his control, and he literally just like left. And he just like, nobody heard from him for like months until he's like, hey, I'm living on this apple orchard in, the middle of nowhere. I think it was like, I don't even know where it was.
I don't know where it was.
The Midwest
either.
Would be my guess. And then that's where the director comes back into the story, because in the commentary, she talks about how, like, she was working on other movies, and then she was like, okay, this We Live in Public apartment thing is over. I want to make my movie now. And they had some sort of agreement, and then Josh basically reneged and just, like, I don't know if he, like, didn't pay her what he was supposed to or something like that, but he basically, like, screwed her over and, like, cut her off from anything to do with it. And she was like, okay, fine, whatever. I'm going to move on with my life and go make other movies. And then Apple Orchard time comes around, and he says, okay, you can make your movie. I'll give you access to everything you want. You can make, I don't care how I look in it.
That's what he said. That's what he said. He said he didn't like the way he looked in it.
That's his reaction to the movie. But there's also another quote that she brought up from him, which is, I don't care how I look. I just want you to make a good movie.
Right.
So that shows you the duality of man in Josh Harris. He contradicts himself.
Contradictory, yep.
So he's got the apple orchard, and then she comes over, and she, like, they set up this, like, rudimentary editing station in, like, a barn. Like, they hadn't even, like, furnished it or made it, like, not miserable to be inside. And I think they got through a little bit of it, and then she went on and did more stuff. And then by the time he's in Ethiopia, of all places, I think by that point he was like American Express was on his ass. So he was essentially like fleeing to a country where they'd never find him.
He was dodging the creditors.
Right. And then she got a gig. This isn't revealed in the movie. This is like in her behind the scenes stuff. She talks about how she got a gig for CNN to do a story in Ethiopia about something else. And then she found out that Josh was living there, and she's like, oh, hey, guys, can I get like an extra day there and a little bit more money to go shoot and finish? So that's where all of Josh's talking heads that are like obviously shot by the documentary crew of One for this documentary were in Ethiopia in whatever, house or setup he had. And then after that, I think she went and tracked down everyone else and did the rest of the interviews. And so I have some stats now, since we're on the topic. 10 years of filming, like we said.
Right.
5,000 hours of footage that she had to trim down. And you know how quickly they did it? 8 months.
Wow.
The entire movie was finished in 8 months once they sat down and started editing it.
5,000
And that includes
hours.
writing the score and getting the music licensing. And
which I got to say, the soundtrack is pretty tight.
that's another interesting aspect of this movie, is that it's like lightning in a bottle in terms of like music licensing. It was like they either got heavily discounted licenses, like, dirt cheap for what the expectation of these bands' rates would be, and then some of them were just straight up free. Like, and almost every single time it came down to, I think she said it was like 13 different songs that they had. She had 13 different panic attacks or heart attacks because of all the different logistical, stressful nightmares that come along with that. But it was like every single time they'd be like, hey, can we use your song in our movie? The artist would then be shown the rough cut of the doc. They'd be like, this is great. You can use my song for whatever. Like, I don't care. So, I mean, it just goes to show the power of how well made this movie is.
It's true. And Jamiroquai was probably, like a little outside of the public eye at that point anyway.
Well, he probably needed the money.
Yeah.
But he's like, I'll take $250. I don't care.
He's like, how much you got?
You know what's my favorite reveal of the movie is at the end when they zoom out on Tanya's talking head and they reveal this giant baby bump. She's like, oh, by the way, I got married to another guy and I'm pregnant.
Yeah, that's great. They were saving that. It's so good.
Oh, it's also great when they're interviewing this. This was 2008 when they were finishing this movie. So they interview the co-creator of MySpace.
Oh, yeah.
And they're like, and he's like, I don't know who Josh Harris is. And they're trying to play it up as if like he's the top dog in Silicon Valley, like him and Tom. Mm-hmm. And it's like, dude, this is like immediately dated because like a year later, Facebook was #1.
Yeah.
And it would be like if this documentary ended with Mark Zuckerberg saying he didn't know who Josh Harris was. Although he might have. I don't know. I do like that the movie ends with a white man going to Africa to find himself. I'm like, ugh, typical.
It was he's like playing like soccer or something with like the kids there.
Playing basketball with
basketball?
the like village children. With
Yeah.
like a deflated basketball.
Yeah, with a deflated basketball.
He's teaching them the fundamentals.
Completely.
And then after the credits start rolling, they cut to this short clip of like the director walking into this like art store in Ethiopia where Josh had like commissioned like these paintings of Gilligan from Gilligan's Island in
Right.
like different scenarios, and like some of them I think were just like prints of pictures from the show, and then others were like paintings. So it was just like this guy just never let Gilligan's Island go the entire way.
He's like the ultimate Gilligan's Island fan. I wonder if did he ever try and like reach out? Did their lives overlap? I don't know who the guy that played Gilligan was, despite what you think about my age. I know very little about that show. I was thinking about though, like this movie does give you like a lot of food for rumination, like after the credits end and stuff, and I was thinking a lot about like how obviously we live in this world now where everything is kind of like you and I right now we're talking through screens, right? Like it's like we're doing this podcast. You live in Texas, I live in Toronto. Like the internet has made this a possibility. The reality is we're both kind of sitting alone in our respective houses, but we've got the connection, and we're putting this on the internet, and hopefully people are listening to it, and that's our own kind of weird way of getting our 15 seconds, our 3 hours, because we always go overboard with this, of fame, and it's like this does happen a lot, and our whole existence has shifted to incorporate like having connectivity while being alone. And that is a fascinating thing because it's like this is just the beginning, and now we're getting AI. you know, like I'm not even joking when I am about to tell you this right now. I was at work the other day, and it was just like super slow. It was like raining, shitty weather outside. Nobody came to the store, and I was so bored. I actually started like talking to fucking an AI. I started talking to Google Gemini. I was just like, hey, you know,
Jordan only
I'm
likes
bored.
it because it has the same name as a Panda Bear song.
Well, it's an Animal Collective song, Craig.
But it's
an Animal
written by Panda Bear. So
I'm pretty sure that it's on an Animal Collective record.
Well.
Anywho, the the point is that, you know, like more and more people, I'm sure, are going to start turning to that, you know, where it's like every now and again I walk past my Google like home device that I got for free for signing up for Spotify, and I'm like, hey Google, like tell me a joke about a duck, you know, and it'll just tell me a joke, and I'm like, that's not very funny, but you know, it occupied like 15 seconds of my time, so cool.
You're like, wow,
and then
it wasn't that funny, but I wonder who they stole it from.
yeah, exactly. I mean, like it's a whole thing, but like, you know, it's like are we headed towards a world where, you know, the connectivity doesn't even matter if it's like organic anymore, you know? It's like, okay, we're talking to people on the internet, but does that even matter if AI can plagiarize or just take, you know, information and then throw it back at you in a way that feels somewhat organic? Are we satisfied with that as humans? And I think the answer is yes. And I think if not now, eventually we will be. And it's kind of depressing and kind of scary. And also, another thing I thought about was about this sort of like, you know, always being in the public idea, where it's like, I don't know, like people say it all the time, like, oh, you know, you talk about like, oh, you know what, I saw a movie where there's a guy sitting in a hammock, you know, and maybe I should get a hammock. And then all of a sudden you got like ads about hammocks.
Because you said it out loud and Big Brother is listening, right?
Yeah, Big Brother's listening. So you are living in the public to some degree because you're not alone. Like something's listening to you, and then it's throwing something back at you. And you know, there's those people that put the fucking Post-it notes over top of their webcams and stuff like that. And you're like, okay, you guys are taking it a little bit too far. But it's like, what if, you know, like what if?
Oh, I'm not guilty of like if I say something that is potentially like, you know, red flag raising, like even as a joke, I just pull up my phone and be like, hey, FBI agent, I was kidding when I said that. I don't actually want to kill, you know, XYZ. So to bring it back to Josh Harris, I just kind of want to say that I think that no one should really want to be famous just in general. Or maybe that's just from my life experience, just like.
I think for a lot of people,
they do but like that. No one should want to. You know, because like if they actually understand what comes along with fame and like the parts of your soul that you have to sell and the compromises you have to make to get there, it's like you're not really being yourself. You're not being your true self. Like even if you are being filmed constantly, I think a part of you dies because you sacrifice it to people that you can't even see. You know? So true. I think Josh sort of experienced that. He, you know, wanted to be rich and famous and have everyone tell him that he was the best and so smart and so, you know, groundbreaking. And he was. But all things must pass. Mm-hmm. So,
and all things come at a cost. Yeah. It's fascinating because that's a like voluntary, you know, want to be in the spotlight, in the public eye. But we're living in a world where it's possible that everyone is in that position without even really being a willing participant. It's like, if it is true that your phone camera is always on, then I am being filmed while I'm taking a shit. And I didn't even sign up for it. And it's like all those moments in the bunker are happening in real time if somebody has access to the various cameras that you have lined around your entire house.
I mean, the world basically turned into the bunker experiment for like a year and a half during COVID.
Yeah.
Everyone had that was the only way you could communicate with if you didn't have the internet, you were basically fucked. And healthcare, but you know, the internet too.
Yeah.
like, no, every single thing was done through the internet, like school, jobs, everything. If the internet suddenly went out during that pandemic, we wouldn't be here right now. We'd probably be dead. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
that stuff only snowballs so slowly.
And it also like kind of shifted the way that we do things to gear it more towards being online, because after the pandemic, people still
Work from
go to
home,
school
offices
online,
are
work
just
from
shutting down
home.
because they're like, we're still making the same amount of money. We could just save money by not having an office, because who
Yeah.
wants to commute to an office, really?
What's the point?
And if you're Josh Harris,
I
you
mean,
don't even
why-
have to. You just get
Why
out
do
of
we
bed.
even go? Why would anyone go to school if you could just like do it at home? You know?
Well, I think there's a difference between work culture and school culture. I think you need that like in-person element. You need to be around other people to develop into a normal person, or else you turn into Josh Harris. Okay?
Yeah,
You
but that's the
need-
future. That's the future, Greg. We're all going to be Josh Harris
No,
because
Zoomers are fucked, and alpha and whatever comes next, beta.
you know what's next. Yeah, it's in the name how second class they are. It's going to be generation beta.
And they're all going to be incels.
Of course they are.
Well, because sex will be
But
be
it-
outlawed by
But
the
it
left.
wouldn't be
The wokes
It wouldn't
will-
be incel because it wouldn't be involuntary, because technically it is voluntary at that point because you would opt to be at home.
Oh, it's just going to turn
So it'd
into
be like-
THX 1138 is what you're saying.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. Maybe that's part of the inspiration for the bunker is like, especially
it
because
is.
they have like that similar, like everything is like clean and white and shiny
Mm-hmm.
to an extent. I mean, the bunker gets pretty disgusting. I mean, when you fill a underground anything with gunpowder smoke, a
Yeah.
grime is going to build up inevitably.
And a bunch of like drug-addled artists.
Yeah. Oh God, when they show that lady in the dining hall with she's like all strung out and shit, just like oh God.
It's depressing.
Yeah, they didn't show a lot of the drug use, but I'm gonna assume that it was definitely going on. That might have been like a legal
100%.
liability thing. Maybe it's easier to get people to sign. I guess they literally just use the disclaimers that everyone signed when they signed up for the bunker experiment to then get away with using the footage of them in this documentary because it covers like the perpetuity, you know.
It covers them being filmed, so I think what would it matter, you know?
Well, this
who's the
brings
one
up the
filming it?
thing with we live in public, where
Yeah.
if you're out in public, technically anything you do is fair use. And if you're out in public, you don't have a right to, unless you're in a state like California where they're a lot more anal about it, you know. Like, for example, Jackass 2. They went to Japan because they didn't have to blur people's faces when they did stunts in public. Which I don't even think you really
Funny-
need to blur people's faces. I think it's more of like a legal liability thing. They just do it preemptively to avoid lawsuits. But
Funny that they don't blur people's faces in Japan yet.
they blur their genitals in porn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Funny, huh?
Is that what you were getting at?
That's what I was going to say. I was waiting for you to fill in the blank
Yeah,
there.
we were
And
on
you
the
did.
same page. This is why we have a podcast together. I have a few quotes from Andy Timoner to wrap this thing up.
Okay.
Well, one I found amusing in the behind the scenes. She said, "I found God in the avid," which I think was her way of saying, like, when I finally was able to sit down and have everything in one place in front of me, being able to construct a film that was all in my head and make it tangible was a lot easier. But just the way
With
she phrased it,
5,000 hours of
5,000
footage.
hours. Shit, I don't even think I had like 100 hours of stuff on my documentary, and I only had one. She had two editors, her and another guy. It only took them 8 months. It took me 2.5 years. But you know, carpal tunnel's a bitch, so that's all I can really say.
Did they just like spend every day? Like, did they do anything else? So she was working on other movies, right?
I think at that point it was just like
It was just
that one getting done.
Okay.
But I think I think the shooting was concurrent, but then the different post-production things were like staggered as time went on.
Right. Okay.
So I have one more quote from her that I related to. I like listening to documentary filmmakers talk about the process of making it because I feel like I experienced a lot of it just making this movie that was about the internet and only using like Zoom footage and stuff. I feel like I experienced a lot of the same phenomena with regards to just like how you as a human react to the process of taking someone else's story and using the language of filmmaking to make something that could be either commercial or not. And so there was a quote where she said, "I realized quickly that my camera was a bridge into worlds that I could never otherwise enter, that this camera allowed me to talk to whomever I wanted to talk to go wherever I wanted to go, and that I could learn more with a camera than I could in a book." So maybe that is why, that could sort of tie into the themes of the doc, which is, you can't really explore the world by reading something that someone wrote down, and maybe in a nonfiction book you can, but it's different than like having a fire, a burning fire inside of a little square that gives you a portal to another part of the world that you would never go yourself. That's why I like Werner Herzog documentaries. I'm like, hey, he went to Antarctica. I'm not fucking going. But I appreciate that he put together this little thing where I can see him stand on the edge of a volcano, and the camera guys swimming under the water with the scuba divers, and they're like, look at this fucking weird animal that's never seen the light of day. Like, I'm not gonna go to the bottom of the planet just to see that. But documentaries, we have the privilege of experiencing it afterwards, which is, I think, what is so intriguing about it is just that it is like, you can stage things in documentaries, sure, like Lance Oppenheim did in Some Kind of Heaven and Sperm World, and like Orson Welles to an extent in F for Fake, although that is its own can of worms with regards to that. But I think what's so appealing to me about documentaries is like, that happened, like 9 times out of 10, something you see in a documentary, like, that really happened, and they were actually lucky enough to get it on camera, and most of the time it's in focus, and like, holy shit, can you believe that? That's why like internet culture, I think, is so intriguing. It was like when they were sharing these viral videos, America's Funniest Home Videos is still going. It's a huge show, or it was, like, when it started back in the 90s, because like that's what people wanted to see. They wanted to see the lives of others in these tiny little bits and pieces for whatever reason, to distract themselves from their own lives, or to just explore another part of humanity that they don't have access to. Even something as silly as a baby falling over or a dad hitting himself in the nuts with a T-ball thing, it is essentially the human condition. And I think that like documentaries are just a type of the sort of like exploration of life and the human condition through art that Josh was trying to sort of get across with his various experiments. So yeah, it's just, this is why I wanted to review this movie, because there's just so many different interesting facets of angles that it explores and talks about that I can't say I've seen another movie like it in my life. I've seen plenty of movies about cults. I've seen plenty of movies about internet personalities that burn out, but none of them have stacked up to this. And this was probably the first thing I ever saw like this. Like I said, I was 16. So I think it might have been partially responsible for me being like, whoa, this is what the real world is. Even if they're trying to manufacture it for their own like false reality, this is people living and trying to just make some sort of impact on the world. And when you have something as like new and exciting and Wild West, free range as the internet, something like this was bound to happen. And the fact that it happened so goddamn fast and then continued to happen for 25 years, 30 years is
continues to happen.
It's just it's wild, man. The internet's a fucking wild place still. I mean, they say the 90s was the Wild West of the internet, and it's like, what's the worst that can happen to you now? You get kicked off Facebook because you shared the wrong article? Like, it's still a wild place. There's still crazy stuff going on the internet. There's just a lot of stuff in this documentary that it predicted so goddamn much. It's crazy. Like, you just, every time I watch it, I'm just like, did this guy sell his soul to the devil to have like premonition powers where he like That's So Raven powers where he could just like see into the future like Dr. Manhattan and just know what was going to happen? Maybe that's why he's so emotionally numb to all this. It's just because it doesn't even faze him anymore. Or it's more likely because he was emotionally stunted because of his adolescent development. But Lovey the Clown.
Yeah, Lovey the Clown, man. You know what? I want to see more Lovey the Clown. I want to know more about Lovey the
I
Clown.
want to know more about
Whatever
where's that
happened
11-year-old right now?
Where's
That guy's
ele-
got to be
yeah,
like
he must
nearly
be-
40 now.
He's like
He's
my
like your
age.
age. Could you imagine if you were in the bunker in 1999, Jordan?
I'd be so fucked up. I'd be such a fucking weirdo. Not to say that I'm not, but like,
Would you let another guy come in and shower next to you? Or would you want the privacy, even though you're being filmed with your penis out?
so if I was 11 years old?
Oh, yeah, I guess I immediately forgot about that context.
I mean, at any age, no. The answer is
Okay.
no. But it's an amazing documentary. I want to know what happened to Lovey. They didn't mention, like, did he just stop with that, or was that like always in the background? They just didn't want to spotlight
Yeah, I
it
think
too
you got to
much?
streamline your narrative. And
Was he in Ethiopia, like doing Lovey for those kids? He was playing basketball with a deflated basketball.
I think Lovey is just a part of his psyche that has never fully left. But I think maybe as he's matured,
kinda pushed it
and,
back a little bit.
developed as a person, he's able to sort of. I think it is just like his way of expressing his darker side. And if he's live, laugh, loving it up in Ethiopia, and he's found a better inner peace than any of the crazier stuff that was happening in his life, then he probably doesn't have as much of an urge to put white makeup on his face. So who knows? I do know that he did a TED Talk at a certain point, which I still need to watch. And he's done a few other lectures here and there, but I think he had some sort of company. Like he tried to do another, like they show at the end of the doc that he had another company that he was trying to start up. I think he had another one even after that didn't work out. So I have no idea how this guy's still like surviving in 2024. This guy's life is so like complex and storied. Like surely there must be something else that. It's been 15 years since this documentary came out. Like, is it that he just never got to the same sort of heights of notoriety and success? So it's not noteworthy enough. Like, I want to see like the Jinx Part 2 for this, I want to see how.
I want to see what's going on.
I want to
now.
get some Zoomers in there to give their woke cancel culture perspective on watching the movie. Hashtag cancel Josh Harris. I mean, this movie has Me Too elements in it. It's unavoidable. I mean, that's again another premonition of internet personalities getting at losing everything because of their sexual misconduct. So,
Yep.
yeah, this is
It is.
someone. You know what? Someone at Sundance when they were presenting the grand jury documentary prize to this movie in 2009, they said this movie will scare the crap out of you. And it's like, yeah. No shit. It still scares me. Like, even though we're so far removed from that part of, U.S. history, we're not really.
I think they were referring specifically to Lovey.
Lovey and just, oh God, just can you imagine? I remember I brought this up. You couldn't leave. They couldn't leave until Josh basically shoved them all out of the building after the cops raided them and shut it down. Like, there were people that still wanted to stay. Like, do you remember that clip? Like, he's literally shoving people out the door and, like, slamming it behind them because it is just, like, it has just failed so utterly that he doesn't even want the, like, stragglers to try and maintain it. Like, he's like, no, I just need to go back to basics, and then the apartment and apple orchard in Ethiopia, and then question mark. This guy's life is a roller coaster, man, and I appreciate that
You rode
he
it. You rode
had
it. You rode the roller coaster.
self-awareness and the lack of an ego that allowed him to turn over all of this material. Like that quote where he said, "I don't care how I look in it. I just want the movie to be good." I don't think that that's 100% honest. I think that that's just him saving face because the other quote, he says, "I don't like how I looked in it." That's why it took so long for her to get the footage from him to make the movie, because he didn't like it. But then it's like at some point something must have changed to where
So he's seen the movie.
his DVD commentary is his initial reaction to watching the movie for the first time. I think when they went to like
Oh my
Sundance
God.
and stuff, he just didn't watch it. Like he'd show up and say hi, like on stage, and then he would just leave.
Right. He just
Yeah.
bounce.
I never forgot about this movie. Like anytime I would like want to give a recommendation or like think about like what are the best documentaries I've seen, this one would always pop up. And it's just like, it's just because it is so like, it's like a kaleidoscope of just fucked up shit
It is. It's
with
never
like
ending.
little pockets of humor in it.
Yeah. Endless reasons to be concerned.
Yeah. And, yeah, man. So on that note,
I would rate this movie fairly highly for being a very odd, look into a fucking odd man and his
and an odd
his
era.
doings and oddity. Yeah, just an odd. Everything's odd about this. Very weird, and also at the same time, just also a glimpse of what we live in right now, which is even weirder, and makes me nervous and maybe a little freaked out about where it's all gonna go.
It is where it's gonna. It's been how it's going to go since then. It will continue to go like that and like it currently is until something happens.
It has to go further, right? Because we only know as much as we've seen, so it's like,
well, yeah, it's like
gonna
now the like what the lifespan of like a creator to go from non-controversial to controversial is like shrinking exponentially as the days go by. So a story like Josh's wouldn't take 10 years. It might take like 10 weeks.
Yeah, take 10 minutes.
And that's less than the 15 minutes of fame. So you got 5 extra minutes to do your apology tour, I guess.
Start all over again.
Yeah. So ultimately, the lesson is just sell out and, let someone else take the fall for when shit hits the fan. And if you want to be famous, don't. Just remain in obscurity and you'll have a happy life because you don't have people watching you all the time. Or, at least as far as you know. We could all be part of like a Truman Show simulation. So yeah, we live in public, but God, I wish we didn't.
No, I mean it's the way of life now, and this movie, this documentary it shows you.
It's the
almost,
10 Commandment slabs.
It's
of the
almost
internet
like
age.
Sperm World, because this is the great grandfather of us of everybody being born into a life of publicity.
Yeah.
Years from now,
Josh
we'll look
Harris
back and
is
be
the
like,
slave-owning pioneer to our modern-day society.
That's exactly it. And so as much as we'll all be publicly broadcast and we can trace that back to this documentary, we will all be the kin of Ari from Sperm World. I'm glad that we did digress because these movies are historically in the future linked.
Are we sure Josh Harris is the crazy one here? Or did this movie make you go crazy?
I think that these movies that you're making me watch, Greg, are driving me to the brink of insanity.
Well, how do you think I feel? You think I was prepared for fucking a guy slicing open his wrists and blowing his head off with a shotgun and then a guy rearranging the blood and gore to get a good picture for his... No.
I was about to say, that, well, that's fiction, but no, actually,
that didn't fucking happen. They were just recreating reality. Well...
Let's go back to Captain Ron, for the love of God.
When things were so simple
simpler
and
time.
quaint. Cloverfield even. I'd take a Cloverfield. Mm-hmm. But with every documentary, truth is stranger than fiction, and goddamn is that ever evident in this movie. So I recommend it. I think it's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. I don't want to say it's one of the best ones ever made because, blanketed statements they're not good. Even the one I just made is a blanket statement, and who needs to deal with that,
All comes down to opinions. I think it's a great film. It's a really well-crafted documentary. It shows something that I wasn't aware of, and it made me think a lot. It made me sick a little bit. It made me kind of excited for future technological, revelations, and it made me also a little frightened. So I commend it for that. What is art if not something that evokes emotion? So it did its job.
Yeah. And you can just add Josh Harris right underneath Ari on your list of people I don't want to be in the same room with ever.
I already made that list, and those are the 2 names that are on it.
Just those 2. Okay. Well, before we make this podcast another hour long from our incessant rambling, let's go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you guys for listening. You will hear us next month. We won't see you. We never do.
Never.
Which maybe that's a good thing, based on what we just watched. So we'll be back next month. Goodbye.
Laters.
Hey, are you tired of my voice yet? Probably. But real quick, I just wanted to say that Jordan and I are in a band called Lunar Panel. Our theme song for the first few episodes was Harry Anderson, our first single, and what you just heard at the beginning of this episode is actually our next single called Half Measures, which is coming out on May 31st. So keep your ears peeled for that if you want to hear the full version of it. Check out our social media for some teasers and to keep up to date with that. At LNRPNL is our Instagram. Lunar Panel without the vowels. And we're going to try to post more on there, and we hope to have an album out sometime this year, or maybe early next year, who knows. So, again, thanks for listening, and take it easy.